The initial concept for the 2023 Halloween scene was two Anubis-like creatures weighing souls. I wasn't looking for an exact representation of ancient Egyptian mythology. Sticking too closely to a historic subject matter can elicit the wrong reaction. The primary interest was creating a spooky atmosphere. The creatures evolved to be something closer to witches at a cauldron, but I held on to the idea of the souls. Most of the scene was constructed from readily available natural materials. This was a fun way to make good use of some late-season yard waste. A few manufactured objects were still needed to make it work. A steel tomato ladder was put to use as a sturdy support frame. Dead tree branches laid across the tomato ladder rungs were used to support an initial set of stiff woven vine loops. The loops were strung together with more flexible vines. The remaining open areas were then filled by weaving more vines like a wicker basket. The weaving process took a long time and used a lot of vines. I realized I was going to have to adjust my plans for this scene. More on that later. I toyed with using a mask for the face. Plastic bird skulls from a craft store worked better. They needed a few modifications. The inside of the mouth I painted red. Wood dowels inserted into two deep screw holes provided a means to connect the head to the vine-woven body. In my opinion, overall creepiness is enhanced with a little movement. The plan was to use some loose balance points so the arms teetered. The finished limb weight made that difficult. I settled on a string that interconnects the arms. They still didn't move much, but it at least provided a certain degree of adjustability. Roots and dried grass worked well for hair. A fabric cloth served as a shawl. The loose weave of the fabric appears opaque during the day, but becomes semi-transparent at night, letting a spotlight inside the creature illuminate the head from within. I wanted the creature's skin to look similar to snake scales, not all exposed vines. The plan was to weave leaf stems between the horizontal vines. I didn't expect this to work. It actually worked surprisingly well, and didn't take that long. The finished product was a little too bright and cheerful for the scene. Fortunately, the colors faded in a few days. Best yet, the leaves curled when dry, adding great texture. The scene includes a magical lantern. The magical part is produced by an LED party bulb that is woven right into the vine-entangled shepherd's hook. The lantern shell is constructed like a smaller-scale version of the creature. Its grass-thatched lid gives it a backwoods feel. Loose fabric mesh on the upper half nicely captures some of the colored light, but also lets a little escape onto the surrounding surfaces. Did the scene need a magic lantern? Probably not, but I already had the bulb, and I'd gotten pretty handy with the vine working at this point. The cauldron is intended to appear bird-like. What appears to be a large nest is supported by 3 spindly bird legs. The object turned out to be a little shaky, not my best work. Poking the legs in the ground greatly improved its stability. A cantilevered spit was added over the cauldron to dangle more souls. The stump of an old pine tree provided perfect balance. I tried different designs for the souls. The most durable and least complicated design is ultimately the Blair Witch model. These are just made of sticks held together with vinca stems. I discovered that vinca stems are strong and flexible enough to be tied into knots. The fire in the cauldron is generated by another special LED light. On warmer nights, it had the interesting effect of attracting a cloud of bugs. This scene is observable from a public walk. I think the atmosphere is enhanced if the observer must commit to crossing a clear threshold, psychologically causing them to feel like they're now part of the creature's realm. A gate is good. An arch works best. The gateway design continues the use of natural materials and a few other found objects. The arch is constructed of bundles of stripped branches. After each section of the bundle was tied together, I forced the ends of more branches into the tied loops. The finished posts were both strong and flexible. The fence is constructed of tree branches fastened to rotting wood ladder rails with vines and a few nails. The vines actually do most of the work here due to the level of wood decay. The result is satisfyingly rustic and decrepit for such a newly created object. The late season garden makes the perfect setting for this creature, and it only gets better as the weather gets colder. After I realized that making two matching creatures was not going to happen, I began to consider some alternatives. At some point, it occurred to me that the other pieces could be used for a costume. This was even better than the original plan because the second creature would be able to move around to interact. The stationary creature has a long neck. This meant that I could place the plastic bird skull on top of a human head to match the other creature's proportions. I just needed to find a way to screen the real face below. A black hood and stocking worked fine. I had several ideas for the costume creature's hair. Dried grass wasn't going to work this time. The final design features a combination of stiff and loose hanging hair cones, for lack of a better term. I added some beads to the hanging ones, partly because I needed the weight, but also because it helps reinforce that these creatures are not feral beasts. Ping-pong eyeballs discovered in the craft cabinet were perfect for creature enhancements. The bird skull and ping-pong eyeballs are hollow and slightly translucent. This provided an opportunity to internally illuminate the head. Internal illumination worked great to highlight the creature's hair cords, and it takes attention away from the human face below it. Overall, this worked much better than the initial flashlight idea. I went back later and added eyelids. Eyelids made the face a little less goofy, a little more menacing. Finding a way to securely set the creature's head on a human head took some experimentation. The eccentric weight caused it to easily slide off. A clay counterweight and an old bike helmet ultimately provided the most reliable method. The bike helmet came with an adjustable mechanism too, which was helpful. The costume creature wears layers of various robes. Good thing, too, since it was cold enough to snow on Halloween this year. I was able to find a cheap piece of brown cloth at a thrift store for the lower garment, a little too plain for my taste. A simple hem edge design applied with fabric paint was all it needed to dress it up. Aha! Success freaking out the dog. So far so good. Let's see what the right setting can do for our intended audience. The illuminated pumpkin was a late addition to the scene. The pumpkin has carved characters meant to give the impression of hieroglyphics or witchcraft. I realized that I could hide the spotlight inside it. It illuminated the pumpkin and spotlighted the arch. This had a great side benefit of partially screening the light at eye level, preventing most of the direct glare. A few sticks of earthy incense created just the right amount of smoke. Aside from the weather, there were a few things that didn't go as well as hoped or planned. One of the late adds to the scene was a tall rack with some disembodied faces. 4 masks with ping-pong ball eyes hung from a bean trellis. I had it rigged with a motion sensor to light up after a person passed under the arch. It functioned exactly as planned, but the effect was way too subtle to be effective. Same goes with the creature communication. I set up cell phones with custom ringtones of 2 alternating creature voices. One phone was in the stationary creature, and the other was on the costume creature. A single text message to both phones set the dialogue in action. It worked exactly like it was supposed to, but the effect was largely lost among the other activity. The weather severely cut down the number of trick-or-treaters. However, I was able to capture a few good interactions.
Who are you? And what do you say? It's okay.
He's probably not. He's probably a teenage with your brother.
Right. See?